Session, the Honorable Judge David Wolf presiding. All ye have business before this court, draw nine, you shall be heard. God bless the United States, this state, and this court. Y'all be seated.
All right, good morning, everyone. Are there any matters we need to address before the jury is brought in this morning? All right, then we are continuing with the defendant's proof. We are ready for the jury. I need to take her phone away.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to continue our hearing today, and I believe we are still on the defendant's proof, so Mr. Evans, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Samara Duncan.
Mr. Duncan, if you'll come up, please.
You wouldn't stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand, be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will truthfully, nope, I'm on the wrong one, I'm sorry.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this case to be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, thank you. You may have a seat.
Just slide.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Duncan.
Good morning.
Would you please state your full name for the benefit of the jury and the court reporter and spell your last name?
Samara Duncan, Duncan.
And Ms. Duncan, what area of the state do you live in?
Currently?
Yeah.
Oak Ridge.
All right. And do you work outside the home at this time?
Yes.
And where are you employed?
Amatech.
All right. And prior to that, what did you do?
Prior to working at
at
Amatech, I worked for the state.
And what did you do for the state?
IT work.
Okay. And at one point in time, were you employed at the Morgan County Correctional Complex?
Yes.
Is that a prison in Tennessee?
Yes.
Did you work there as a corrections officer?
I did.
And do you know Stephen Wiggins?
I do.
And how do you know him?
Went to school with him.
And when you say you went to
Ms.
school,
Duncan, if you would move that
Oh, I'm
microphone a
sorry.
little closer to
Sorry.
us to make sure that they're
Sorry.
picked up. Thank you.
thank you. When you say you went to school with him, do you remember about what years or was it elementary school?
Yes, elementary up to middle school.
And do you remember the name of the school?
It was Walnut Hill and then Central and then Harriman Middle School.
And when you think back about Stephen at that time, what was your perception of him?
Perception of Stephen. He had trouble in school as far as making friends, and he would interrupt the classes sometimes, but not like willfully. He was just kind of like in his own little world.
Could you tell he was different from the other kids?
Yes, absolutely.
And when you say he would interrupt the class, would he be sitting at his desk?
Yes.
Would he have his head up or his head down on the desk?
He would have his head down, like kind of like this.
And would he be making any noises?
Yes.
And what kind of noises?
So he would kind of be like this, and then he would be like shaking his head and kind of making noises with his mouth, just like strange noises to himself.
And did the teachers have trouble understanding Stephen?
Yes.
And likewise, did the students have trouble understanding Stephen?
Yes, some did, yeah.
And as it related to the students, or excuse me, the teachers, do you remember them trying to help Stephen?
The teachers?
The teachers.
I don't know that they were trying to help him. I felt like the teachers didn't really understand him.
Did he get punished?
Yes.
Did he have a lot of friends?
No.
Was he teased?
Yes.
Was he bullied?
Yes.
And did you also go to school with someone named Marlena Wells?
Yes.
Do you remember your perception of Marlena?
Yes.
And what was that?
She was bullied as well.
All right. Do you know whether or not her and Stephen associated with one another or were friends with one another?
As far as I know, I think Marlena was his main friend.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down, and you may have a seat in the courtroom, or you may leave.
Thank you.
You may call your next witness.
Your Honor, I call Marlena Hope. Marlena Wells.
Stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand, be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat in that chair and speak directly into the microphone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last for the benefit of the jury and the court reporter?
Marlena Michelle Hope, Hope.
And Ms. Hope, where do you currently reside?
Spring City.
And how long have you lived there?
I moved there August 3rd this month.
Okay. And Ms. Hope, do you know Stephen Wiggins?
Yes.
And where do you know Mr. Wiggins from?
We grew up together.
Right. And did y'all go to school together?
Yeah.
Do you remember approximately what years you went to school?
Up to about 7th grade.
And do you remember the name of the schools? Or maybe it was different schools, but
Walnut Hill Elementary, we went through Central Intermediate, and I believe Harriman Middle School.
okay. And what do you recall about Stephen back when you went to school with him?
I mean, he was a lot like me, quiet, stayed pretty much to himself as far as I could tell. Didn't really go out the way to be involved in anything. Didn't play sports. I mean, we used to get called out of class sometimes, you know, whenever DCS come through, whatever. So, I mean, we were kind of like of the same set.
Okay, and you said you used to get, I didn't know if I heard you. You might want to pull that mic or get closer to that mic just a little. You said that you used to get called out of class when, did you say when DCS came
DCS
through?
would come through and, you know, things like that.
Why would that happen?
I guess because there were suspicions that, you know, things were off about home, and so they'd take us out of class, ask us questions.
All right, and that's both you and Stephen?
Well, not just us, but I mean, there were like a handful of kids in the school. Like, we'd always get called out every time they came through.
And was Stephen popular?
No, not really.
And was he bullied?
Yeah.
And you said you and he were friends. Were you bullied at school as well?
Yeah.
Is that kind of what brought y'all together as friends?
In a way. I mean, it's not like anybody, you know, really talks about it. We see it happen, you know.
Do you remember anything about how Stephen, his demeanor in school?
Quiet, very reserved, withdrawn. You didn't really see him like around groups of people or anything like that. Like, we just kind of stay off to ourselves.
Did Stephen ever indicate to you that he was being abused?
It's one of those things, like, we never really talk about it, but whenever it's the same kids being pulled out for these questions, and, you know, I know what they were asking me. I'm sure they were asking the same, you know.
Those are my questions, Judge. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. You are free to go, or you may remain in the courtroom.
Thank you.
State may call your next witness. I'm sorry, the defense may call your next witness.
The defense calls Ms. Ashley Brock.
You would stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand, and be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Sit in that chair. Slide up and speak directly into that microphone.
Good morning, Ms. Brock. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine.
Would you please state your full name, spelling your last name for the benefit of the jury and the court reporter?
Ashley Brock, B-R-O-C-K.
Ms. Brock, what area of the state do you currently live in?
East Tennessee.
Okay. And have you always lived in East Tennessee?
Yes,
Do you know Stephen Wiggins?
I do.
And how do you know Stephen?
Grade school.
Now, what do you do for a living?
Currently, I work for a medical company. I do at-home work.
Prior to that, what did you do?
I was a deputy clerk with Anderson County Criminal Court,
And how long did you do that?
7 years.
You said you went to school with Stephen,
I did.
and you said grade school. Do you remember which school?
First was Walnut Hill, then Central Intermediate, Harriman Middle, Harriman High School.
Is there anything in particular that you remember about Stephen in school?
Mostly the way he was dressed. That's the first that sticks out in my mind. Always the clothes that were about a size too big. Untied tennis shoes. Usually the same t-shirt or variation of. The one that sticks out in my mind is just a plain white t-shirt. Dirty, stains. I remember just shaggy hair. Greasy as if it hadn't been washed, but that's my recollection.
And do you remember anything about how he may have smelled or his hygiene?
The best way I can, yes. He, you could tell it'd been a while. Sometimes when he hadn't had a bath, the high body odor, sweat, things like that.
And you said you were starting to say the best way you could describe it. How would...
No disrespect to anyone, but there's a certain smell that people that live in the housing projects have, and I know Stephen didn't, but that it was kind of familiar with that smell.
How'd the other kids in school treat him?
Not well.
And were they cruel to him?
Yes, he was very much a loner. I don't remember him having many friends, if any. I know he got teased an awful lot.
And did you have an interaction with Stephen about that interaction for the jury?
This is one I'm not proud of, but I think it was maybe first or second grade. I was, the snotty little kid who had a new lead pencil, and he had just a regular old number 2 pencil. And I remember, and I have no idea why this is stuck in my memory, but it's the one memory I have of him. We argued over the fact that I had the mechanical lead pencil, and mine was better. And I remember him saying, well, this is lead, and I was adamant that it was not. But I was a stupid child.
And you talked about kids being cruel to him and teasing him. Did he get bullied as well?
He did. They made fun of him for his clothes, the way he smelled.
Thank you, ma'am. Those are my
you.
questions, Judge.
Does that have any questions? Thank you, ma'am. You may step down and you are free to leave or you may remain.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, call Wendy Wagner. If the court will indulge me, I want to step out in the hall and have a brief conversation.
All right, thank you.
You would stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand, be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Seat in that chair. You would try to get up as close to the microphone as you can.
Good morning, Ms. Wagner.
Good morning.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like you to state your name for the benefit of the jury and the court reporter, and I'd like you to spell your last name.
Wendy Wagner, it's Wagner.
And Ms. Wagner, where do you currently live?
We live in DeKalb County. It's Smithville, Tennessee.
Okay. And are you married?
I am.
And how long have you lived in Smithville?
Well, I'm 44, so 44 years.
Okay. And Do you know Stephen Wiggins?
I do.
And do you know his brother Scotty?
I do.
How do you know them?
They're my first cousins.
And you say who was your mom and dad?
Scott and Stephen's daddy would be my mother's brother.
I mean, your mother's name was?
Norman was Wiggins. It's Hendricks now.
And based on you being first cousins with Stephen and Scotty, did you ever have occasion to be around them when you were growing up?
We'd go see my granny about once a year, and you know, if they come up, we'd get to, you know, play with them a little bit. But I'm a little older than Stephen and Scott, so didn't really hang out with them a lot. My brother was about the same age, so you know, they play together some. Stephen's a little bit younger than Scott, so.
Okay. And you say your grandmother, what was her name?
Mabel Wiggins.
Okay. And is there anything in particular you recall about Miss Mabel's home?
Are you referring to the incident that I witnessed with Scott?
Well, in just a minute, but I mean, who would have been, when you would go, who would be there?
Oh. Granny's was pretty much where everybody would gather. So it depended on, you know, if it was holidays, pretty much everybody be there. All my aunts and uncles, cousins. It's a little block house that, you know, had a living room with kitchen divided out, and if you could find a place to stand, that's where you'd be, you know.
Did you have much occasion to interact with your Uncle Scott Wiggins?
Scott wasn't somebody that you would interact with. Scott was somebody that would come in and kind of sit to himself, and if you talked to him, he would talk to you for a second, but he wasn't a personality to interact with.
Did there come a time at your grandmother Mabel's home where you saw Scott physically abuse Scotty Wiggins?
Yes.
And how old was Scotty?
Scott Jr.,
Yes.
maybe 6, somewhere around through there.
Describe for the jury what you saw.
Most of the kids were outside playing. It was Christmas, so not cold, but, you know, cold enough. Everybody's outside. Grandma always had the heater on in the house, so we'd have the door open because she'd keep it pretty warm in there, you know. So I'm standing out on the porch, and my little brother and Scotty were in the living room. Scott Jr. They were playing with something that I guess they had opened up a present, and the box and papers and stuff were still sitting there. So Big Scotty had yelled and told little Scotty to stop playing. They're 6. They were still playing. Big Scott come in the living room, pulled his belt off, and proceeded to strip little Scotty from head to toe. He never made a sound. He didn't scream, he didn't cry. He shed maybe one tear and just stood there till Big Scotty told him he could sit down.
And when you say he striped him from head to toe,
I mean,
what does that
he
mean?
left absolute just blisters on this kid.
And after that, what did Scotty do?
Big Scotty or little Scotty?
Well, little Scotty.
He stood there and waited for his mom to come in, and I got my brother and we went outside, and she come in with Stephen. I said something to her about she might want to check out little Scotty. She took him to the bathroom, and I didn't see anything after that. We left.
Thank you, ma'am. Those are my questions, Judge.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down, you may have a seat in the courtroom, or you may leave if you would like. Defense may call your next witness.
we call Jennifer Bryant.
Stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand, be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Have a seat in that chair right there, scoot all the way up, talking to the microphone.
Good morning, Miss Bryant.
Good morning.
Would you introduce yourself to the court and then spell your last name, please?
My name's Jennifer Bryant. My last name is Bryant.
Miss Bryant, do you know Stephen Wiggins, who's here in the courtroom?
Yes.
All right. I want to get a little history from you so we can put all of this in perspective, okay?
Yes, sir.
How do you know Stephen Wiggins?
Well, I've known him since he was a little boy, little kid. Me and my husband used to go to their house with their mother and their father. Met him a long time ago.
All right. Did you know Scott and Juanita Wiggins before Stephen was born?
Yes.
And how was it that you got to know them?
Well, we lived in town in Harriman, Tennessee, in apartments, and we lived in one apartment. They lived on down in another apartment. And we really didn't, I mean, we seen each other occasionally, you know, in the hall and kind of like that. But I could hear a lot of noise, like argument, fight, fuss. At that time, I never seen no physical abuse, but later on I did.
And when you say you heard that, where was that noise that you've described coming from?
Coming from their apartment.
And there being Scott and
Juanita and Scott
Wiggins.
Wiggins.
Okay. Do you recall about when that was, when you were living in that apartment, when you heard this?
Well, that would have been before, let's see, my daughter Misty was born in 85. So I want to say before she was born, so maybe 80, 82, somewhere along there.
Okay. And during those times when you were living in the apartment, did you have a lot of contact with Scott and Juanita Wiggins at that point?
Not at that time.
Okay. Did there come a time where they, Scott and Juanita Wiggins, moved out?
Yes, so did we.
Okay.
We moved out of the apartment. I think we moved before they moved. And we moved to Margrave Street. Or Brown Avenue, excuse me. They lived on Margrave Street.
Okay.
And at the time, we knew them, so my husband and her husband would go fishing together.
Okay. And is that how the relationship
Yeah,
between the two couples started?
because my husband loved to go fishing, and so did Scott.
Okay. And so, and you said that was approximately what year would that have been?
Okay, Misty was born in 85, and she was probably about 7 when we moved there, or when we lived there, and she was probably about 8 or 9 the whole time we lived there.
Okay. So during those several years that you lived there, did you get to know Juanita and Scott better than when you lived in the
Oh,
apartment?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
How frequently would you or you and your husband go over to their house?
Me and my husband go over to their house basically every day when we moved from the apartment to Brown Avenue, and they lived on Margrave.
Okay. And this house on Margrave, just briefly, was it a house? Was it an apartment? What kind of
Theirs
structure?
was a house, and theirs was it was a part. Well, it really wasn't an apartment. It was the projects at the time.
Okay. But the house on Margrave where the Wiggins family lived was an actual standalone house?
Yes,
Okay. And you said you went over there almost every day?
yes.
All right. When you started going over there, did you see anything about whatever was going on in that house that concerned you?
Oh, yes, it did. A lot.
Can you just tell the jury what
Well-
you observed?
I'll give you an example. One day I was there, and Juanita had went to fix Scott a sandwich. You know, like me, I would just kind of throw the sandwich together. It didn't matter if the bread was perfectly right. Well, she gave it to Scott, and I guess it wasn't up to his partaking. And next thing I know, he had grabbed her by the hair of the head, blacked her eye, and she was screaming, and I was like, leave her alone, you know, over a bologna sandwich. And I've seen several times that he would just grab her by the hair of the head because she didn't do this right or that right. I told her several times to, why don't you leave him? And I didn't know till later on why she didn't leave him till recently. I didn't know why she wouldn't leave him.
So these acts of violence by Scott towards Juanita, you said you saw several of those. When you
yeah.
say several, are we talking 2 or 3 or more than that?
More than that.
Can you even recall how many times you saw him attack her like that?
I remember one time, I don't actually know what caused the argument. We was in their truck, and I don't know what pertained to why it went down that way. And they had got into an argument over something, and she was trying to get it out of the truck. And next thing I know, he was dragging her with the truck. I guess she was trying to hold on or maybe get out. I don't know. And me and my husband was screaming and telling him to stop. He was going to kill her. And him and my husband, of course, got into it. But like Scott, he didn't care. He was a very controlling person. She wasn't allowed to have nothing, no money, no nothing. If she went to work and if she didn't get back in the right time, he thought she was out with somebody or she was doing something she wasn't supposed to, or she wasn't allowed to have, like, he would have to take control of all the finance money that the girl had. She couldn't have a dollar. I mean, that was sad.
And was Scott working?
No.
Was Juanita Wiggins going to work then?
Yes.
And so the money that she made, what did she do with it?
She'd have to come home and give it to him. If she didn't, she would, of course, get beat up again.
And did you see him do that to her when she allegedly stepped out of line?
Oh, yeah. Just because he didn't like what she done. If she didn't do... I can remember one time, too, he had went fishing and caught these big fish and brought them in there and put them in the bathtub. And I guess he must have told her to go clean them. She said, I'll get to it in a few minutes. The next thing I know, he was beating her up because she didn't get right to it right then.
When you say beat her up, I mean, what did he do?
He was always grabbing her by the hair of the head, calling her names, blacking her eyes. I've seen so many black eyes on her. And so many times.
Did you ever see him just randomly start hitting her for no reason?
I can't remember that, but I remember mainly the times that he did hit her over a bologna sandwich, over not doing this or not getting home in time. Like if she went to the store and like he thought maybe it'd take 30 minutes and it took 35 minutes or 32, just a few minutes over what he thought, he would grab her and beat her up because he thought she was out with somebody.
You mentioned that she wasn't allowed to have anything or control her own money. Was she allowed to go anywhere by herself other than work?
As far as I know, it was just to work and back. And he was like he was on that time. He had that time. I remember one time he went out to the car and done the I guess it's the mileage or something. He looked and wrote the mileage down to see if maybe she went further. when she got back.
What was the condition inside that home? What, did you observe anything about that that was unusual?
Very depressing.
How so?
The kids, they was real young, you know, and it was like they had to stay in their room, like if an adult's come in or anything, and like if we come in, they would have to stay in their bedroom.
You say they, you're talking about Scotty,
Scotty
and
and
Stephen.
Stephen.
Okay.
Both of them kids had to stay in the bedroom. They would come out and talk to parents. Hi, how are you doing? They couldn't. Had to stay in that room all the time, and they had to get permission to even come out to use the restroom or get a drink of water. And if they didn't, you know, here he was either screaming at them or I never seen him hit one of them, to my knowledge. That's all I can tell you there.
Okay. How would, when you would go over and visit, you said it was depressing, how would Stephen and Scotty Wiggins appear to you?
Lonely. Lonely kids. Like they couldn't. And I never seen them out in the yard. You know, like my kids, they could go to a friend's house. And, you know, they couldn't go. The only time I ever seen them kids leave is with Juanita's mom and their dad when they pull up in their truck. That's the only time I only seen that one time that they got to go with them. But they couldn't come out and go out in the yard and play ball or anything. It was like they had to stay in that room. It's like he had to control them to make sure they didn't say anything that could damage Scott.
Did he do things like cover the windows and keep all the windows closed
Yeah.
and covered up?
Yes.
And you said this went on, you observed this going on every day for years.
Oh, yeah. I asked Juanita, you know, I don't know if I can say this. I asked her, why don't you leave him? Why don't you? She said, I can't. And then I found out later that if she, like me and Juanita would stay at the house. I'd try to keep her away because my husband would go fishing with Scott. Mm-hmm. He would try to keep him away as much as she could because she would end up getting beat up all the time over this little thing. And I said, why don't you just leave him, you know, go on while I'm here, and I'll just tell him, and, you know, you just take off and left. And she said, I can't. She was afraid that he would do something to me and my family, you know.
For helping her?
For helping her get away.
That's all. I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Crouch?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Bryant. It is Ms. Bryant, correct?
Yes.
Hey, did you know in this time period of Mr. Charlie Webb?
Yes, I do.
Did you see him in the courthouse yesterday?
I don't even see him now, really.
Okay. Do you still know him?
I know him, but it's been years and years that I've seen any of these people. This is the first time I've seen Scott since he was a little kid.
Scott? Stephen?
Oh, Stephen, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No problem. So, Mr. Webb testified that he used to go fishing with Stephen's father a lot. So, obviously, there was a group that went fishing a lot.
Yes, yes.
He also testified he was around their house a lot.
Yes.
As were you.
Yes.
And you never saw Scott beat up on Stephen?
I never seen him hit the kids.
Okay.
I've always seen him hitting Juanita.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further?
No, you're not.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down, you may leave, or you may stay in the courtroom if you like. So, call our next witness.
Misty Bryant.
Stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand, be sworn.
You solemnly swear from testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Go sit in that chair, slide all the way up and talk directly into the microphone.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I do.
Good morning, Ms. Bryant.
Good morning.
Would you introduce yourself to the court and spell your last name, please?
My name is Misty Bryant, Bryant.
Ms. Bryant, do you know Stephen Wiggins, the defendant who's here in the courtroom?
Yes,
How long have you known Mr. Wiggins?
since we were like 6, 7.
Okay. Where did you first meet him?
And we were living in Harriman, I think.
Okay. And were you living there with your parents?
Yes,
And is your mother Jennifer Bryant?
yes,
Who's, I think, now still in the courtroom?
yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you some questions about things you may have observed when you were a child,
Okay,
okay? I'll take you back a while, okay?
okay.
Were you ever in Stephen Wiggins' house where he lived?
Yes.
Was that something that happened often or only on a few occasions?
A few occasions my parents didn't take me over there very often.
Do you know why?
It's the abuse.
Okay. I want to ask you some things specifically about Stephen's father. Do you know who he was?
Yes,
Was he Scott Wiggins?
yes.
Okay. Were you around Scott Wiggins much?
Not a whole lot, but yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you about if you ever observed Scott Wiggins being violent towards any of his family.
Oh, yeah.
Can you just tell the jury what you observed?
Well, when we were kids, they weren't allowed to come out of the bedroom. I recall one incident where Stephen had walked out of the bedroom, was going to the bathroom to get a cup to make him a glass of water. And he didn't get permission from Scott. When he went back into the bedroom, Scott came in behind him and picked him up and slung him into the wall.
And what did you said that was Stephen?
Yeah.
Who did that? What did Stephen do in response to that, if anything?
He just stood there.
Did he cry? Did he scream? Did he do anything?
No,
He was silent?
silent.
Did that response surprise you?
Yeah,
Why is that?
because he was a little kid. It was like he was scared to respond.
And you said that when you went over there, the boys weren't allowed to leave their bedroom.
No,
Okay. And did they share a bedroom?
yes,
So there were two boys in one bedroom?
yes.
All right. When you were there, the few times you went, did you go to their bedroom? Were you out there with the adults?
Yeah, I went to the bedroom.
Okay. Did you observe any other acts of violence, either toward Juanita Wiggins or boys?
Not that I can recall.
When you were around this age, did you go to the same school as
Yes.
Stephen? Were you in the same grade or about the same grade?
About the same grade.
Okay. Did you ever have any courses in school about inappropriate touching by adults? Those kind of classes,
Yes.
were those given to you then?
Yes.
Okay. During the time you were in that class, did anything happen that you've recalled and wanted to share?
Stephen said that his daddy was touching him inappropriately.
And that was around the same time you were in that class about that was not
Yes.
appropriate?
Yeah.
Okay. Did he say anything about his dad hitting him?
Oh, yeah.
What did he say?
He said that he was hitting him and he was touching him in places he shouldn't be touching him. He didn't have to tell me he hit him. I mean, I was telling him, slamming him up against the wall.
So you already knew that?
Yeah, I knew that.
Miss Bryant, did you tell anybody?
No, he asked me not to.
What did he say?
He just asked me, he said, no, I ain't told nobody but you. Please don't say nothing. You'll get me in trouble.
Those are all my questions. I'll pass the witness.
State, have any questions? Thank you, ma'am. You may step down and have a seat in the courtroom, and you may leave.
Right, may we approach?
You may. Ladies and gentlemen, we this morning are going to have some procedural issues. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to bear with us while we take these matters up. There will be 2 or 3 of these that we'll need to send you out for, give you an opportunity to stretch your legs. But if you will step out with the bailiff, then we'll bring you back in as quickly as we can. Thank you. All right, Mr. Evans, my understanding is that these next 3 witnesses that you have are they family members that you want to make an offer of proof about the effect that the death penalty would have upon their family? Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, we're going to let this be made as an offer of proof, and then I want to make sure that I instruct these witnesses that they are not to express those opinions in the presence of the jury. So let's call your first witness.
Call Julie Ceasman.
You would stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand, be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Have a seat in that chair, speak directly into the mic.
Do you need me to remove my mask?
Please do, Ms. Ceasman. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Ceasman, would you please state your full name for the benefit of the court reporter and spell your last name?
Julie Creasman, Creasman.
And Ms. Ceasman, you understand why you're here today testifying?
Yes.
You understand that the jury in this case is determining whether or not to give Stephen Wiggins the death penalty?
Yes.
If he were to be executed, how would that affect you?
It would completely destroy me. I love him as much as if he were my own son.
I know it's hard, Ms. Ceasman. Thank you. That's the offer of proof, Judge.
Mr. Cruzman, let me talk to you for a moment, okay? I understand this is an upsetting situation. I know it's emotional for you. My job is to try to make sure that the integrity of this process is protected. I have made certain rulings. Among those rulings is that no one, neither the victim's family, nor the defendant's family, nor any other witness will be allowed to give their opinion about the impact that the defendant receiving a particular sentence will have upon them personally, or advocate for or against a particular type of sentence. It is the jury's province to make the decision, and they must make that decision on the record and the evidence at trial and at this hearing. So what I'm instructing you, and this is a court order that you must obey, is that you must not express what you just have told us here, or express any opinion about the death penalty or the life in prison, or advocate one way or the other to the jury about that. Okay, do you understand that?
Yes,
Can't
sir.
talk about the effect that him being executed would have upon you and your life. The defense lawyers will be able to present the evidence through you that they wish to present, but that part will not be admitted, and that's a court order. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Then I will show for the record that she understands the court's admonitions and that she will be allowed to testify. What I'd like to do is go ahead and, is there any objection to bringing the jury in, and then me simply advising them that in their absence, I believe she's already been sworn, is that correct? Then we'll advise the jury that we called her in and we swore her in and that she is testifying under oath. Any objection to handling it that way?
No objection.
All right, then we'll bring the jury back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your cooperation. As I explained to you, there are certain procedural steps that I'm taking, and I wanted to let you know that this young lady has been called by the defense. I'll let the defense introduce her, but in your absence, she has been placed under oath, so understand that her testimony today will be sworn testimony. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Ceasman.
Good morning.
Would you please state your full name for the benefit of the jury?
Julie Ceasman.
Ms. Ceasman, where do you live?
I live in Dayton, Tennessee.
And you may want to speak up just a tad and,
Okay.
and into that mic, and it may help to get closer to the mic.
Okay.
Thank you. How long have you lived in Dayton?
Since I was like 13, gosh, it's been like 30 years.
Oh, wow.
I might be aging myself, I'm sure.
Well, and how do you know Stephen Wiggins?
I'm his aunt.
Okay, and you say you're Stephen's aunt. On which side?
On his mother's side,
All right, so your sister is whom?
Juanita Wiggins.
Okay. And did you know Scott Wiggins as well?
Yes, sir.
And does Stephen have a brother?
Yes, he does. We call him Scotty, but his real name is Scott.
Now, you said you live in Dayton now, and you had since you were about 13.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd you live before that?
Harriman, Tennessee.
Okay. Were you born in Harriman?
Yes, sir.
And what are your parents' names?
Robert and Wanda Hicks.
And who all was in your household growing up when you were little?
Originally, it was just me and my sister and my mom and dad. And then later on, I guess I was maybe about 7, and my grandparents moved in with us because my grandmother became ill.
Now, did you and your sister Juanita get along as kids?
Pretty much, yes.
Now, what's the age difference between you two?
There's 7 years difference.
Okay. So I'm sure there were times when you were kids y'all didn't have a lot in common, right?
Probably not. She probably didn't like playing with me, but she did.
What'd your father do?
He worked in a factory at Dayton Products.
So, and you said Dayton Products. So was that in Dayton?
Yes.
So how far of a drive is it from Harriman to Dayton?
About 50 miles one way.
Right. And so did your father make that commute every day for work?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at some point, well, let me ask you this. How was your childhood?
I think I had a wonderful childhood.
And did you think you had a pretty stable, you and Juanita had a pretty stable home growing up?
Oh, yes.
Okay. At some point, you said you moved to Dayton around age 13?
Yes, sir.
Now, before you moved to Dayton, is your sister's, when did she move out of the house?
When she was 18, I think I was 11,
Okay.
12.
But before y'all moved back to Dayton?
Yeah, she moved out before we moved to
You
Dayton.
did, okay. And why did she move out of the house?
She was pregnant with her first child, and she wanted to move in with her boyfriend.
Okay. Now, prior to y'all moving from Harriman, had you met Scott Wiggins?
Yes, sir.
And what was your perception of Scott when you first met him?
I didn't like him. I found him creepy.
Okay. And your sister, she was still in high school, is that right, when they met?
Yes, sir.
And so what about your parents? What did they ever, early on at least, have an opinion of Scott Wiggins?
They didn't really say anything, but I don't think they liked him.
Now, do you remember when Juanita found out she was pregnant?
Yes, sir.
And when she was still living in the home with you and your parents?
Yes, sir.
How did your parents react to that?
My dad took it really hard because she's, unmarried. She hadn't finished school yet.
And did she finish school?
I think she finally did.
Did she finish it then, or did she stop going when she was a kid?
I can't remember.
Okay. And would it have been around 1982 when Scotty was born?
Yes.
Okay. After Scotty was born, well, let me back up a minute. Where did Juanita move into when she left?
She moved in with Miss Wiggins, Scott Wiggins' mother.
And is that Miss Mabel?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever have an occasion to go over to Miss Mabel's house?
Yes, sir.
All right. And did you ever stay the night over there?
One time.
Okay. And how old would you have been?
At the time that I spent the night, 16, around 16.
Okay. Was that a kind of a rare occurrence?
I think that's the only time I ever spent the night.
And is there anything in particular that you can remember about that house?
What do you mean?
Well, kind of who was there? How many people were there?
Just myself and Scotty. He was about 5, and my sister and Scott and Miss Wiggins. And I think that was the only people there that day.
Okay. And when you stayed there, were you kind of helping take care of Scotty, baby Scotty?
She just asked me to spend the night. Yeah, I would play with him, but
Okay. Now, did you continue to interact very much with Scott and your sister between when Scotty was born and when Stephen was eventually born?
other than my parents just going and getting Scotty each weekend to visit. They would come for like Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that, but just to pick Scotty up, that was it.
Okay. Now, you talked a little bit about, you said your parents would go and pick up little Scotty for a visit. Would they drive? Describe how that would happen.
They would usually wake up early on Saturday morning and drive the 50 miles to, when they lived in Herman, they didn't drive that far, but go pick him up, and he would spend the night with us. And usually on Sundays, they would take him back home.
And was that consistently every weekend?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, were you around, kind of moving up towards Stephen's birth, were you around your sister when she was pregnant with Stephen?
Yes.
Did you ever see her use any drugs while she was pregnant with Stephen?
Yes.
And what did you see her use?
Marijuana.
Was Scott there too?
Yes.
And was he also using marijuana?
Yes, sir.
And Stephen was born, around 1986?
Yes, sir.
And you and your folks were living in Dayton about that time?
Yes, sir.
And about how old would you have been at that point?
16.
Now, once Stephen was born, did you spend a lot of time with him when he was a baby?
Yes. I think my mom and dad went and got him as soon as they got out of the hospital and to come visit.
And so right when he's out of the hospital, that Stephen, little baby Stephen's at your folks' house with you?
Yes.
Did you bond with Stephen?
Yes.
And did you help take care of him?
Yes.
What kind of things did you do?
Well, when he was first born, he would cry a lot. So he would like to be held and rocked. And for some reason at night, he wouldn't go to sleep good. So he would lay across my chest, and I would sleep with him on top of me.
And did, as Stephen was a baby, did he seem to favor you too?
Yes.
Is it fair to say you guys have had a pretty close bond over the years?
Yes.
And you love Stephen?
Yes.
Now, was there a time either after Stephen's birth or before Stephen was born that you were able to, or you ever witnessed Scott Wiggins be abusive towards Scotty?
Yes, one time.
And could you describe that for me, please?
I was about 11 years old. Scotty was maybe 6 months old. He could sit up good. My sister, I can't remember if they just came to visit. We were in my parents' kitchen, and they had put Scotty in his high chair and gave him some food and gave him a baby spoon. And I remember Scott got mad because he missed his mouth. He was making a mess. And he slapped his leg with his hand and left his handprint on his leg. And I took Scotty out of the high chair. And I remember looking at my sister, and she wouldn't even look. She would just stare at the table. And I took off running with Scotty. And my father pulled up in the driveway and met Scott. And they had a pretty good argument.
Okay. And why were you running?
Because Scott was chasing me.
Were you scared?
Yeah.
Were you scared for little Scotty?
Yeah.
Around the time Stephen would have been in 4th grade, did he come to live with you and your parents?
Yes.
And
For the year, yes.
And by that time, was your father still in good health?
No, sir. He had had a stroke and he was bedridden.
And when you talk about him being bedridden, did he have to be fed through a feeding tube?
Yes, sir.
Did he have a breathing tube, a tracheotomy as well?
Yes, sir.
And he, safe to say, he required round-the-clock care?
Yes, sir.
When Stephen was living in that house with y'all during that year, did Stephen help take care of him?
Yes, he helped my mom with everything. His medicine helped. Remember, to give his medicine as scheduled. He knew how to change his feeding tube, clean his tracheotomy. He knew how to work the bed and help rotate him in his bed.
And were you able to observe Stephen with his grandfather prior to his grandfather becoming ill?
Yes.
And how would you describe their relationship?
They had a great relationship. My dad loved the kids.
And while Stephen was living in the house, did your father pass away?
Yes, sir.
And were you able to note what effect that had on Stephen?
Yes, he took it very hard. He even requested to be one of the pallbearers.
And was he in fact one of the pallbearers?
Yes.
After around the time your father passed away, did y'all move out of the house you were in at that time into a new house?
Yes.
And was Stephen still living with you and your mother at that time?
He's finished staying that summer with my mother.
And after your father had passed away, did Stephen seem to be affected by that and how he was acting?
Yes, he was. Of course, he was only like 11 then. He was scared at the new house. I remember he would make my mother leave the closet doors open so that they could sleep. I'm not sure if he thought my dad's ghost or something was in the closet or what he thought was in the closets.
During the year that he lived with you and your mom and dad, did you homeschool him?
Yes, sir.
And how did he do with assignments and doing the homeschool?
Every day when I come home from work, he'd have every one of them completed. I never had any trouble with him.
Now, you said that summer he left you and your mom's house.
Yes.
Where did he go?
Back home to his home.
And at that point in time, were Juanita and Scott still together?
Yes, sir.
And I think it would maybe have been around, do you recall it being around 2002 when Juanita left Scott?
Yes.
Now, between the time Stephen left living with you and went back to Juanita and Scott, and around the time she left Scott, did you have much contact with Stephen during that period of time?
Yes, he would call us, and we would still go get him for the weekend.
And you and your mother?
Yes.
How did you find out that Juanita had left Scott?
We went to go pick him up one Saturday like we always do, and we get there and the house is empty. I remember they had a storage shed. I opened it up, it was empty. I remember peering through the windows. There was no furniture or anything.
Did you know where Juanita and Stephen were?
No.
Did you try to find out?
Yes, we contacted her employers. They said that she just didn't show up for work. They didn't know what happened to her. One employer was very concerned because she had worked for her for many years. I think my mother contacted Miss Wiggins, Scott Wiggins' mother, but she didn't know.
Okay. How did you finally find out where Stephen and Juanita were?
Well, eventually, like a few weeks later, Stephen would call my house collect, but I was at work. But he wouldn't. He talked to my Scott's wife at the time. She was there at my house.
You mean Scotty?
Scotty's wife, Sarah.
Okay.
He never told where he was at. He just told her that he was okay and Juanita was okay.
And did he ever say, to your knowledge, during those conversations, why he wouldn't say where he was?
And no, other than Mom told me not to tell you.
Okay. When, after those conversations, or when those are occurring, when's the next time that you hear from Stephen?
Just a few weeks later, there was a phone call come about 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was Stephen, and he was wanting us to come get him.
Did you go get him?
Yes, sir.
And who all went?
Myself, Scotty, my mother, and my ex-husband.
And when you got there, did you go into the location where Scotty and Juanita were living? Did you go in the house?
No. My mother went up to the door. Stephen was already outside.
So when you pulled up, Stephen was outside?
Yes.
Did he have any bags packed or anything with him?
Yes, all of his bags were packed.
And do you remember what time of year this would have been? What season?
It was warm out, so it wasn't winter.
Okay. Did you have any discussion with Juanita at the when y'all picked up Stephen?
No. I know my mother did, but I don't know what they said.
And y'all pick Stephen up, and he gets in the car. What did he say? Anything?
No, sir.
And what was the plan or the idea when you went to pick him up? Where was Stephen going to go live?
He was going to come live with me.
And at that point in time, who all lived in your house?
Well, his brother, Scotty, and his wife had moved in with me, and it was me and my husband.
Okay. And about how many years did Stephen live in your house?
About 3 years.
Okay. Was there anything odd about Stephen's behavior that you noted when he first came to live with you?
Yes, when he first came there, I don't know what he was scared of, but he would be hysterical. You couldn't hardly get him to calm down. He would want to either sleep with me or, me come sleep with him. So to get him to calm down to go to sleep at night, I would either sleep in the floor beside his bed or he would sleep beside mine.
And about how old was he?
15.
Now, was your sister Juanita, was she on board with you having custody of Stephen so he could go to school?
Not really, no.
Did you have to file something in court?
Yes, I had to hire a lawyer and go to court so they could get him in school.
Eventually, did Juanita agree?
Yes.
But you got custody of Stephen?
Yes.
For that period of time. Now, how was his behavior during about the first year that he was with you?
I didn't have really any problems with him at all.
And for a period of time, was he even doing fairly well in school?
Yes, sir.
At some point, did his behavior change?
Yes, sir.
And what did you start noticing about his behavior?
He wouldn't bathe. His room would look like a hurricane went through it. He would even just throw food in the floor. He didn't want to go to school. He would skip school.
Did he get to a point where he wasn't following the rules of the house for you?
Correct.
Did you take him to a counselor?
Yes, sir, I did.
And during that period of time, did you have any concerns that Stephen had been physically or sexually abused?
I started putting the pieces together, and I remember asking Dr. Ovenlock if he had been physically or sexually abused.
And would the doctor answer your question?
No, he said that he wasn't allowed to answer that because of patient confidentiality.
During the time that Stephen was living with you, did he stay in contact with his mother?
At first he didn't, and then she started calling.
And did you notice these behavior changes that you're talking about? Did they appear to coincide with when he reinstituted contact with his mother?
Yeah, that's when he became worse. I don't think she was saying anything to him wrong. I think she just reminded him of everything.
Now, at some point in time, Stephen left your home, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, there's been some discussions about DCS interaction when Stephen was with you. Was Stephen?
Yes, I was the one that called DCS when I started having trouble with them. They're the one that told me how to, they set up the stuff for the psychiatrist and everything, help me with everything.
Okay. And at any time during this time that Stephen lived with you, did he ever assault you?
No, sir.
Did he ever threaten you?
No, sir.
Did he ever raise his voice to you?
No.
So if there's a DCS record that notes some kind of pending domestic assault charge, is that inaccurate?
That would be correct.
Now, you said DCS got involved. Is that because Stephen stopped going to school?
Well, I called them because I didn't know how to get him help. I didn't know what I needed to do to help him.
Now, it's clear he wasn't following the rules of your house there at the end. Is that right?
Correct.
And he wasn't listening to you or your husband at the time. Is that correct?
It's correct.
And you were, in fact, I think, pregnant at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, I was.
And where did Stephen end up going from your house?
They put him in like a boys' home.
Okay. Was that for very long?
No, he was there maybe a few weeks until he turned 18.
And then at that point, where did he go?
He went back to stay with Scotty and his mother.
Was there anything during all your time around Stephen during those years that you ever noticed about how he acted? I mean, was he impulsive?
Oh, yes. From even being small, very hyper, very impulsive. I didn't think before he just did it.
And was he prone to hurting himself?
He would have a lot of accidents, yeah.
One moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, those are my questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions? Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. You may have a seat in the courtroom if you'd like. It's 10:30. Mr. Evans, you have another witness that I assume may be alone.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take our mid-morning recess at this point in time. We'll be in recess for 15 minutes.
All rise. Court's in recess.